Here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, council members, city officials, also our streaming audience. I'd like to welcome you to the August 9th City Council meeting. Apologize for coming on a little late. We had an executive session prior to the meeting, and we just wrapped that up. Tonight we have 4 items on our agenda. We are meeting here in chambers with limited restricted public attendance, and we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. Moving forward, Ms. Fleckner, if you would, please continue with the roll call of members.
Thank you, President Arnold. Phillips?
Here.
Payne?
Here.
Nickerson? Here. Tapman? Lewis?
Here.
Gillum? Here. Corcoran? Here. And Prohl?
Here.
At this time, if everybody would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The minutes from the previous meeting have been distributed for review. If there's no corrections, additions, and everything's okay with the minutes, do I have a motion to accept the minutes by Ms. Nickerson, seconded by Mrs. Payne? Roll call on the motion to accept the minutes.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tapman? Yes. Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl?
Yes.
And the minutes from the previous meeting has been accepted as they are. We'll start out this evening with community affairs for our reports from committees. And Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, President Arnold. Community Affairs has one assignment this evening on the agenda. It is number 4. It is a first reading of an ordinance accepting the material terms of the One Ohio subdivision settlement pursuant of the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding and consistent with the terms of the July 21st, 2021 National Opioid Settlement Agreement, declaring an emergency, and at the appropriate time, since this is time sensitive for the city, I'll be asking that we waive the 3-read rule. And that's all that Community Affairs has to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We'll move to Human Resources. Mrs. Payne.
Thank you, President Arnold. Human Resources, we do not have anything on the agenda this evening. However, I do have a new assignment, and that is to look into bringing back the development director for this city. And we had a committee meeting prior to council meeting to discuss bringing back the development director's position. This is an existing position that has been vacant for a couple years. And as we're moving forward with a master plan for the city, this position is basically a critical position, especially when we're looking at applying for grant monies to assist and support all of the departments in the planning process and development in the city. That gives a little bit of background on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Payne. From there, we'll go to development. Ms. Nickerson.
Thank you, President Arnold. Development has one thing on the agenda, number 3, assignment number 21073, request for legislation to name City of Chillicothe's appointment to the District 15 Public Works Integration Committee, with Dave Fischel being the mayor's appointment. And at the appropriate time, I'll be waiving the 3-read rule because we have a deadline of 8/20. Also, I would like to, if it's the appropriate time, to waive a 3-day receipt rule. And present council with an assignment regarding the Tiffin property. Development Committee held a public meeting on August 2nd to discuss the assignment 21069, which is the request to appropriate funds and purchase the property located at 145 South Bridge Street. which is the former Tiffin property. The request is for $300,000 for appropriation for approximately 7 acres within the city. We are in agreement that this will be a good opportunity for the city to play a serious role in the future development in this neighborhood and our community. I would ask council to support to proceed with the acquisition of this property. And due to the nature of the purchase, I would like to waive the 3-read rule at the appropriate time. Yes.
I don't have my mic on. We're waiving the 3-day receipt rule to bring it into council tonight as item 5. Mr. Prohl seconded the motion, and roll call on that motion.
Phillips,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Tatman, Lewis,
Yes.
Gillum,
Yes.
Corcoran,
Yes.
and Prohl.
Yes.
And that motion
The
has
mic didn't
passed.
come on, but there we go. I just-
So that will become item number 5 on our agenda this evening. Anything else, Ms. Nickerson?
That's all at this time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. From there, we will move to our Finance Committee, which is Mr. Prohl.
The Finance Committee has no items to report on tonight, so that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. This evening, we have one item on the agenda. Item number 2, first reading, accepting the donation of property located northeast of Pullen Park parking lot on South Hickory Street. We did have a committee meeting for this. We already maintain this piece of property at the park, so at the appropriate time, I will ask to waive the 3-read rule so they can get moving on the acquisition of the land. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Corcoran. At this time, Mr. Shoemaker is not here, of course, so we will move to Safety Services, which is Ms. Gillum.
Thank you, President Arnold. At this time, we have nothing on the agenda, nothing new to report.
Okay, thank you. From there, we'll move to City Services, which is Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you, President Arnold. City Services has one item on the agenda tonight. It's number 1. It's second reading of an ordinance appropriating $120,899.20 for the city's share of the costs for improvements to the law enforcement center and declaring an emergency. At the appropriate time, I'll ask to waive the 3-read rule. We had a committee meeting last week in regards to 21-065, which was vehicle charging stations, which will be on the next council agenda. I would also like to call a committee meeting for next Monday at 7 p.m. In regards to 3 past legislations of 21-066, be approving trash containers for downtown, and then 20-095 for taxi cab, and then 20-107 for recycling. I think those were all my
At
outstanding.
what time, next Monday, at what time?
7 p.m., please.
Okay,
And that concludes my report.
here in Chambers?
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll be here.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. And we have Mr. Tatman of our Utilities Committee.
Thank you, President Arnold. Utilities Committee does not have anything on the agenda, and actually, I have nothing to report on. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Tatman. Moving on, we will move to our reports from our officials. We'll start out with our mayor, Mr. Luke Feeney. There you go.
Thank you, President Arnold. Says I'm green, which thinks I'm good to go. So reporting on tonight's agenda. Following up on the appropriation for the Law Enforcement Center, this is a commitment we've previously made, and I would ask for council's positive support for that item. Additionally, in item number 2, to some extent, this is a clerical matter. As Councilwoman Corcoran has already mentioned, we are already maintaining this property. When the opportunity first presented itself, I did discuss with the Parks and Recreation Director if there was any better use for this property, potentially transferring to the land bank or some other potential property owner, and based on the size and nature of the property, being a part of Poland Park is what I believe is its best use. So I'd ask for your favorable vote on item 2. Item 3, you've most often heard the Public Works Integrating Committee. It might be most relevant to you when we've discussed OPWC funds. The county is allocated OPWC funds. That's Ohio Public Works Commission funds on an annual basis. We've used that money in years past to complete projects or support projects. I believe this year the project it's supporting is stormwater and paving and sidewalk work on Watt Street. The current appointee is Dean Carroll, and the suggestion here is that he's replaced for a 3-year term by Dave Fischel, so I'd ask for your support there. And then I'm not going to comment on item number 4. Item number 5, I believe, was item number 5 the 932? Or is there a 5 and 6 added? I'm sorry.
I only have a 5 added. Well, I only have the Tiffin that's been added.
Oh, okay.
Who's, what's number 6? Who's would be the committee over number 6?
Well, there's 2. What I was handed today was 2 borrowings, two bond legislations. One is for $932,390, which is for vehicle and equipment acquisition, and then the other one I received was for land acquisition. What I was actually going to comment on, though, was that, and then there's an aggregating legislation which combines the two into one proceeding for borrowing. My suggestion, though, so following up on Councilwoman Nickerson's comments, particularly related to the nature of the purchase of property and the urgency of these matters at times, in discussing with the auditor, and for both of these, I'm of the personal opinion that we probably can afford to wait 2 weeks. And then the other sort of question that I have that I want to be certain on, so we don't have to come back and redo this, is that the land acquisition bonds that you have in front of you don't state with specificity the actual property being acquired. And so I think that we want to make sure that it's airtight in terms of the supplemental legislation. If there's the necessity to name particular parcels, I think there are several. And so that legislation, either we're fine as we are and it gets added when the borrowing happens, but I suspect it might be possible that we need supporting legislation to specifically identify the property being acquired. And so I don't think that there's any harm in the acquisition process. I know Councilwoman Nickerson requested, probably at my behest, to waive the 3-read rule for tonight, but I think that we're okay to delay that another 2 weeks. The other borrowing that you have, or that you could have had, I suppose, for the 932, the auditor can talk about a little bit. It is authorizing the borrowing of amounts that were already appropriated, with the exception of one piece of equipment, which is a mower. And so you're not actually appropriating more money with that other legislation that I've referenced. I think that you could waive the 3-day receipt rule if you so chose and accept that legislation tonight so that you could get one reading in on that tonight so that the second reading happened at the next council meeting for both of them. But I'll defer to the auditor on whether or not that's appropriate for tonight. But I do think that there are two potential pieces of legislation in front of you. Clear as mud? How about this? Are there any questions I can answer on that one? The legislation that I have in front of you, just in front of me, authorizes borrowing. Particularly on the land, it just says we're authorizing you to borrow money to buy land, but it doesn't say what the land is. And I think that we probably want to pass, council probably wants to reference the parcels, particularly for the public's sake, just so it's in front of the public as well. And so, President Arnold, if you think that this should be a different agenda item, this 932.
I'm going to ask who was that assignment that went to? Was that?
It's possible that they got rolled into one under finance. I don't know if it's two different assignments or not. I just have two. I just have two letters in front of me.
You think so? Do you want to waive the 3-day receipt rule and bring it in tonight for first reading? Okay. Okay. Mr. Proles made a motion to waive the 3-day receipt rule, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on the motion to bring the other item in as number 6 this evening.
Phillips,
Yes.
Kane,
Yes.
Nickerson, Tatman, Lewis, Gillum, Corcoran,
Yes.
and Prohl.
Yes.
And I don't have it in front of me what the exact number was, 932,000, I think, something. It was money that was already appropriated.
932,390.
All except for a mower. So that is moving on to item number 6 on our agenda this evening.
Dreaming of bonds.
Okay, so that is item number 6 on our agenda this evening. We'll move on to our auditor.
Well, let me finish my report. I want to talk
I'm
about.
sorry.
Imagine that. I'll just keep it going. So to be concise, the thing of most importance I'd like to report on is a recap of community response team meeting we had last week, which I asked that each participant start with a win because I knew bad news was coming, and in fact it was. Our health commissioner, Garrett Giozzi, gave us an update on the most recent COVID news, particularly as it relates to Ross County and Chiillicothe. The summary of it is, and at least for actionable items, the city will be returning in all of its all of its buildings to requiring masks of both the public and employees. We'll be putting out a release on our page along with shared publicly of the other community entities that have also signed on to make this decision. Obviously, things are moving very quickly with this variant, and we are doing this with excessive caution and care for the community. For me personally, what I have most in mind is kids, students returning to school and sort of making sure that we as the public in the areas that we can control step things up so that kids this year can return to school and have the closest and best school experience that they can. And I think by some of us taking on some discomfort and annoyance and returning to masks, something that we probably had all pitched and hoped we'd never use again, I think that hopefully we can impact some of that. So look for that communication from the city and other community partners coming out within the next day or so, and then those new signs up in this city building. And in an effort to conclude with a positive note, I'll wish everybody a happy fair week. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Feeney. Moving forward, we'll move to our auditor, Mrs. Spetnagel.
Okay, so to make this even more clear than mud, there's actually 3 pieces of legislation. There is one for 932, and that is for the actual purchase of equipment that was already included in the budget with an additional lawnmower. And then the second piece is for the $300,000 land purchase. And then the third one is consolidating those 2 bonds. So that third one is actually behind the $300,000 one at the back of that packet. So I just wanted to let you guys know that there are 3 bonds. I don't know if we want to receipt them all in tonight, but there are 3 of them, 3 different pieces of legislation. Other than that, that concludes my report, unless anybody has any questions on that.
Yes, Mr. Prohl.
I think we probably should wait. Sorry, didn't turn on my Mr. Microphone. I think we should waive the 3-day receipt rule for the additional legislation as well. We have the legislation to bring in the, it says not to exceed 300,000 land acquisition bonds. And we also have the other one was, did I hand you mine?
Here, there's all 3.
Okay, there's the other one, which is the ordinance consolidating the 2 bond issues of the city of Chillicothe. So I would ask, we've already waived the 3-read rule on the 932,390 vehicle and equipment acquisition bond, and I would ask to waive the 3-day receipt rules for the legislation for the 300,000 land acquisition bond and the consolidating 2 bond issues legislation as well.
I have a motion to waive the 3-day
second.
receipt rule on the putting the 2 bonds together. And I have a second by Ms. Nickerson. And we'll have a roll call on waiving the 3-day receipt rule on that, please.
Yes.
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 And that will put that as item 7 on the agenda to read this evening for first read, which collectively takes the 2 bonds, puts them together for $1,232,390. Okay, very good. Moving on, we'll go back to our auditor. If you have anything else, Ms. Becknagel? Nothing? Okay. From there, we will move to our law director, which is Ms. Villarreal.
Thanks, Bruce. We discussed the office's request for the emergency legislation at the committee meeting this evening, and I just need to reiterate the necessity to pass item 4 tonight so we can get the signed documents for the subdivision opioid settlement agreement to the appropriate parties prior to the August 13th deadline, which is a hard deadline we have to meet in order for the city to be included in any of those settlement disbursements. That's all I have for tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Villarreal. Moving on, it goes to me. I really don't have anything to report on this evening. The fair's going on this week. Hope everybody enjoys it, like the mayor had said, and get plenty of fair food, and enjoy all the activities and all the demonstrations and displays and everything that's out there. We will go on to audience participation. Council Rule 21 does limit each speaker to a 5-minute presentation. I will silently indicate when you come close to that 5 minutes to give you time to summarize your presentation. We do need your name and address for our records. A couple people in the audience. Does anybody would like to speak this evening? I've set up a microphone over there in the corner. All you got to do is push the speak button on it, and it should light up green, and you're good to go.
I'm good.
Okay.
Melody Lepsinski, 355 Brennan Road, Chillicothe, Ohio, 45601. I wanted to provide yet another Purple Heart update. I met with the Veterans Council this past week, and they have approved putting a monument into Veterans Park. The next step is the Veterans Commission, which I would assume is going to pass with flying colors, which is this Thursday. I'm scheduled on the Parks and Recreation Board meeting on the 18th, and I'm really not sure what, if anything, they do other than rubber stamping it. I spoke with Jeff Carmen, and I'm hoping I'm not speaking out of turn with this. Am I speaking out of turn with this? Well, I was just gonna say there is signage that is available through the Military Order of the Purple Heart, and he let me see what it is they have, the sizes and the price, and I have indicated to him that if it is acceptable to the city, that I would roll funding for that into the capital campaign that I'm going to be starting probably around the 18th to raise the miscellaneous amounts that are due for the monument and things of that nature. I also spoke with Stacia out at the Veterans Hospital, and they were going to put a sign up on 104 showing that Chillicothe has been designated a Purple Heart City. But when I was talking to her, it seemed to make more sense, as opposed to them putting something up of their own creation, that they also get the same type of sign that would be other places on other roadways. And I am going to roll the cost of their signage into this capital campaign too, because it's really not a lot of money, and I don't foresee a problem with that. I am curious because in the last week or two, I've been told you might want to touch bases with the city engineer about laying a concrete base. I don't know if it's something that I need to do through them or not. Mr. Mayor, is that something I want to I don't know. So I figured I would swing by his office at some point because I don't know. I've just had multiple people in the last week say, well, have you talked to the city engineer? And that's not been on my radar at all. So I don't know. So
is this going?
It's my understanding that the city engineer had something to do with pouring the concrete for the Veterans Memorial Monument that's there. And this is very small, but still. Okay. So I would have to have a building permit. Okay. I'll talk to him. I've been every place else. That's just another stop. And one other thing, we're not going to make the September 12th date because of getting approvals from the different councils and commissions, but we're still sure hoping for October. So once we get permission, by the way, I guess I should say I established a committee to talk about what was going to happen with this monument. And we have talked about this fundraising campaign, and once we get approvals on everything, it's probably going to be some notices in the newspaper, on the radio, things of that nature for anybody that would like to contribute towards it. But we've already got about $1,500, and all we're looking for at this point is, I think, about $6,500, so I don't foresee it being a problem. But you didn't give me a high sign, so I guess I'm good.
No, I didn't. I
Okay.
didn't.
I know, I said you didn't give me a high
Yeah,
sign.
you're more than fine.
Okay, so
Okay.
unless anybody has any questions. Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Melody. Anybody else want to speak this evening? No? Okay. Moving on to old business. Does anybody have any old business they'd like to bring up this evening? Not seeing it. Petitions and correspondence received by the clerk. Do you have anything, Ms. Fleckner?
No, we haven't received any items since the last meeting, President Arnold.
Okay. New business. Anybody? Nope. Okay. Committee assignments and meeting dates. Mrs. Lewis called for a meeting next Monday here in Chambers at 7 o'clock for 2 assignments that she has. There's been several committee assignments that's come out this last week, or 2 weeks since we've met in session. Accept and appropriate funds from the American Rescue Plan and to create a new account for tracking purposes. Accept and appropriate $22,000 awarded by the 2021 AARP Community Challenge Grant that goes to the Transit Department. Request for legislation to name the City of Chillicothe's appointment to the District 15 Public Works Integration Committee, with David Fischel being named as appointee, and that's on tonight. Adjust and update the non-bargaining ordinance for the position of Development Director of the city. We had a meeting on that prior to this meeting tonight, and approve and sign the One Ohio Subdivision Participation Form Agreement that Mr. Phillips has on the agenda tonight, which we will be voting on later. And that's all that we've had for assignments since our last meeting. So we'll move on to legislation at this point. And Ms. Fleckner, whenever you're ready, we will start out with item number 1.
Second reading of an ordinance appropriating $120,899.20 for the city's share of the cost for improvements to the Law Enforcement Center and declaring an emergency.
President Arnold, at this time, I would ask to waive the 3-read rule.
I have a motion to waive the 3-read rule, seconded by Mr. Prohl. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson? Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation, please.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that item has passed. Item number 2, please.
First reading of an ordinance accepting the donation of property located northeast of the Poland Park parking lot on South Hickory Street.
Yes, Ms. Corcoran?
Yes, President Arnold. At this time, I'd like to request that we waive the 3-read rule.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by
Second.
Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
The motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 3, please.
First reading of a resolution naming the City of Chillicothe appointment to the District 15 Public Works Integrating Committee and declaring an emergency.
Oh.
Yes,
This-
Mrs. Nickerson.
At this time, I'd like to waive the 3-read rule.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that resolution has passed. Item number 3, or I'm sorry, item number 4, please.
First reading of an ordinance accepting the material terms of the One Ohio subdivision settlement pursuant to the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding and consistent with the terms of the July 21st, 2021 National Opioid Settlement Agreement and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
President Arnold, at this time I would ask to waive the three-read rule.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Mrs. Payne. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation, please.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 5, please.
First reading of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $300,000 land acquisition bonds for the purpose of acquiring land for municipal purposes and declaring an emergency.
Okay. That'll move on to the next meeting. Item number 6, please.
First reading of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $932,390 vehicle and equipment acquisition bonds for the purpose of acquiring certain vehicles and equipment, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Mr. Prohl.
At this time, I would like to ask that we please waive the three-read rule.
I have a motion to waive the 3-read rule. Roll call on that motion, please. Seconded by Ms. Lewis. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 7.
First reading of an ordinance consolidating 2 bond issues of the City of Chillicothe, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
And that the other one, we're going to do another read next week. Yeah, that'll
you
move
can't-
on to the next
Yeah,
meeting.
you can't
Okay.
combine.
Okay, that'll move on to the next meeting. That concludes our business this evening. Does anybody have anything to add at this point, or do I have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Nickerson and second by Mrs. Lewis? Roll call on the motion to adjourn.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Corcoran?
Yes.
And Prohl.
Yes.
And that concludes our business and our meeting this evening. Thank you, everybody. Till we meet again.